The sky over Zathara was a storm of fire and smoke. Explosions ripped through the city, and the ground shook with the march of thousands of soldiers. Princess Liara stood atop the palace walls, her hands gripping the cold stone, her heart pounding like a war drum. She had never imagined seeing her world burn. The kingdom that had thrived for centuries, the people she had loved and protected since childhood, were now caught in a nightmare of smoke, fire, and blood. Her mind raced with memories, laughing in the palace gardens, playing hide-and-seek among the tall crystal towers, sharing secrets under the glow of the twin moons. She remembered how innocent life had been once, how safe her world felt, and now all of that was gone, shattered like glass under the feet of soldiers. She could hear the cries of her people, the clash of weapons, and the terrifying roar of alien ships tearing through the sky. Liara's eyes scanned the battlefield, desperate for any sign of hope. She saw the defenders fighting with courage, but it was not enough. The enemy moved with precision, their power overwhelming. Her stomach twisted with fear and guilt. She was the princess, the future of Zathara. Yet she felt powerless to stop the destruction. Every fallen soldier made her chest ache. Every scream made her hands tremble. And then she saw him. Amid the chaos, a lone warrior moved like a shadow through the battlefield. His strikes were swift, merciless, and terrifyingly skilled. He cut through her army as if they were nothing, leaving destruction in his wake. At first, she thought he was just another enemy soldier, another faceless warrior carrying out orders. But something about the way he moved, something about the way he paused as if searching for someone, made her heart skip a beat. Liara's mind refused to believe it, but the memory hit her with unbearable force. She remembered a boy, a friend from her childhood with bright eyes and a mischievous smile, who had promised to protect her no matter what. The boy who had climbed the crystal towers with her, shared her dreams, and laughed under the stars. And now, standing in front of her, commanding an army that was destroying her people, was that same boy. Her throat tightened. She whispered his name, barely audible over the noise of battle. Kale! The warrior froze for a moment. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Liara's breath caught in her chest. Could it really be him? His gaze softened ever so slightly, a flicker of recognition passing through the chaos of war. For a brief, heart-stopping second, time seemed to pause, but the world did not stop. Explosions shook the ground, soldiers charged forward, and the cries of the wounded filled the air. Liara's heart ached as she watched Kale move again, cutting through her defenders with the same precision, the same determination. He was a ghost from her past, now a force of destruction, and yet she could see the hesitation, the tiny pauses that made her hope. Maybe, just maybe, he remembered her too. Her hands shook as she gripped the wall tighter. The battlefield had changed everything, and yet in that fleeting moment, Liara felt a spark of something impossible. Hope. A childhood memory, a friendship long buried under years and distance, had survived the horrors of war, and in that moment, she realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The boy she had loved as a friend, the boy she had trusted with her secrets and dreams, was now the warrior who might destroy her world. Or save it. The winds of war howled around her, but Liara's heart held one fragile, desperate thought. If Kale was still in there, still the boy she had known, perhaps there was a chance. Perhaps the war was not over, not yet. And with that thought, she made a silent promise to herself. She would find him. She would reach him. And somehow, against all odds, she would try to save him. And her people. The battlefield had quieted for a moment, but only slightly. Smoke drifted in heavy clouds, and the cries of wounded soldiers echoed faintly. Kale leaned against a shattered wall, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Every time he had lifted his weapon, every strike he had made, he had felt the weight of what he was doing. But seeing her, the Princess Liara had stopped him in his tracks. He had not expected to find her here in the midst of war, alive and defiant. He remembered her as a little girl, running through the palace gardens with laughter that could chase away the darkest clouds. She had always been fearless, always stubborn, and always kind. And now, grown and regal, she stood like a queen on the battlefield, carrying the hopes of her people in her eyes. Kale's heart ached. How could one person bear so much and still shine so brightly? Liara, meanwhile, had hidden behind the walls, her gaze never leaving him. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, disbelief, sorrow, and a spark of hope. Could it really be Kale? The boy she had known, The one she had laughed and cried with as a child now stood before her, fighting against her own people. She could see the hesitation in his movements, the flicker of uncertainty, and it made her heart pound even faster. And maybe he remembered. Maybe he could still change the course of this war. Kyle's thoughts raced. He had been trained to follow orders, to fight for the invaders, believing it was the only way to save his own colony. But seeing Liara, seeing her alive, seeing the pain in her eyes, shattered every reason he had clung to. His loyalty to his commanders suddenly felt hollow. What did it matter if he won battles if he lost the people he truly cared about? He lowered his weapon slightly, just enough to make his hesitation noticeable. The enemy soldiers around him noticed, but Cale's mind was elsewhere. Memories of childhood whispered in his ears, climbing crystal towers with Liara, sharing secrets under the moonlight, dreaming of worlds far away from duty and war. They had promised to protect each other no matter what. Could he still honor that promise even now? Liara's heart softened as she saw him falter. She had spent years fearing this moment, fearing that the boy she had loved as a friend would become a monster. But here he was, torn, struggling with the same emotions she felt. The battlefield had changed him, yes, but the core of Cale, the boy she had known, was still there, fighting quietly against the orders that forced him to harm her people. The wind carried the distant sounds of the war, but between them there was a strange silence, a connection that transcended the chaos surrounded them. Liara whispered his name again, almost like a prayer. Kyle, please. For a fleeting second, time seemed to stop. Cale froze, his hand still on his weapon. Recognition, pain, and longing passed through his eyes. He wanted to run to her, to throw his weapon aside, to end the war in one bold act of courage. But he knew it wasn't that simple. Every step he took could be fatal, not just for him, but for her people. Liara felt a tear roll down her cheek, but it was not entirely of sadness. Hope glimmered. If Cale could be swayed, if he remembered who they once were, perhaps they could find a way to stop this war. Perhaps friendship and trust could outweigh the power of armies and the lies of leaders. Cale ducked behind the wall, breathing heavily, torn between duty and heart. He had always dreamed of heroism, but not like this, not at the cost of the one person who mattered most. And Liara, standing tall despite her fear, made him realize that true heroism was not about orders or battles. It was about doing what was right, even if it meant defying everyone else. For the first time in the war, both Liara and Cale felt a spark of clarity. There was a way forward, a chance to rewrite fate if they could only survive the night. And in that brief, fragile moment, a silent promise passed between them. They would find each other again, no matter the cost. The battlefield roared around them, but deep in their hearts, they both knew that the war was no longer just about empires and armies. It was about the bond they shared, the friendship that could survive even the fire of war. Night had fallen over the battlefield, and the ruins of Zathara glowed faintly under the pale light of the twin moons. Fires still burned in the distance, but a strange quiet had settled over the city. Princess Liara moved silently through the broken streets, careful not to be seen. Her heart beat fast, a mix of fear, hope, and longing. She knew Cale might be nearby. He always sought solitude, always went to the places that felt like home, and she hoped, no, she needed to see him one last time. The river. That was where they had spent countless hours as children, sharing dreams and secrets, imagining adventures beyond the palace walls. Liara's footsteps were light but urgent as she reached the riverbank. The water shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting the memories of a past that now felt like a lifetime ago. And there he was. Cale stood at the edge of the water, silent, his armor battered and streaked with dirt. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched, but his eyes were soft. They searched the dark as if hoping for something he could not name. And then slowly he looked up and saw her, Liara. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if speaking louder might shatter the fragile world they had found in this quiet moment. She stepped closer, her chest aching with emotion. "Kyle, it's really you," she said, barely believing the words herself. For a long moment they stood in silence, letting the sounds of the river and the distant fires soothe the storm of their hearts. Then Liara spoke, her voice trembling. "Why are you here? Why are you fighting against us?" Cale's gaze fell to the water. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I had no choice. My people, my home, I was trying to protect them. But now I see what I've done, and I see you. His eyes met hers again, full of pain and regret. I never wanted to hurt your people. I never wanted to hurt you. Tears welled in Liara's eyes. And yet here we are, Kale. Everything we knew, everything we believed. It's all broken. How did it come to this? He shook his head. I don't know. I was so sure I was doing right. And I was wrong. You always knew what was right, even as a child. And now seeing you, I realize what courage really is. Liara's hand reached for his, hesitant but desperate. When their fingers touched, a spark of the past seemed to flow between them. It was as if time had folded, bringing back the trust, the friendship, the unspoken bond that had always been there. We can fix this, she whispered. We can stop the war, but we have to act carefully. If anyone sees us, if the wrong people find out, it could mean death for both of us and more for our people. Kyle nodded, his jaw tight. I know, I'll do whatever it takes. I won't let this war destroy everything we loved. They talked through the night, hidden beneath the stars, sharing memories and plans in hushed voices. Liara spoke of strategies to protect the city, while Kyle whispered ways to slow the enemy's advance. Every word, every glance deepened their connection, reminding them of the bond they had shared as children, a bond that had survived distance, time, and now war. As dawn approached, the first hints of light painting the ruins in soft gold, they made a silent agreement. They would work together secretly to end the conflict. They would find a way to save their people, no matter the cost. And more importantly, they would protect the spark between them that had endured even the darkest moments. Before they parted, Liara looked at Kale with tears in her eyes. Promise me you'll remember who you are. Remember us, Kale cupped her face gently. I will, always. You're my anchor, Liara. Always. As she slipped back into the shadows of the city, a sense of hope stirred in her chest. Against all odds, the princess and the warrior had found each other. And for the first time in this war-torn world, it felt like there might be a chance not just for survival but for love, trust, and a future worth fighting for. The river flowed quietly beside them, carrying their memories, their promises, and their hope into the dawn of a new day. The sun had barely risen, painting the sky with streaks of red and gold, but Zathra was still a city of ruins. Smoke lingered over the shattered towers, and the streets were littered with broken weapons and wounded soldiers. Princess Liara moved quietly through the palace halls, her mind racing. Every step reminded her of what had been lost and what could still be saved. She could feel Kale's presence in her heart, the memory of his eyes, his voice, and the promise they had shared by the river. Kale, meanwhile, returned to his army with heavy steps. Every movement felt like a lie. To his commanders, he was loyal, obedient, the perfect soldier. But in reality, every order he followed was a calculated deception. He delayed attacks, repositioned troops, and sent false messages, all to protect Liara and her people. Yet with every decision, his chest tightened with fear. One wrong move, one slip, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Liara knew the stakes. She had called a secret council in the depths of the palace, meeting only with those she trusted most. They whispered plans in hushed voices, tracing maps of the city and enemy positions. Every suggestion carried a risk, every choice a possible death sentence. But Liara's mind kept returning to Kale. She knew he was on the other side, pretending, risking his life silently to help them. That thought both comforted and terrified her. Then the news came. A messenger, panting and covered in dust, delivered a note directly to the princess. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The message was short, precise, and horrifying, an assassination plot aimed directly at her. Someone within the enemy ranks had discovered her connection to Kale. Someone knew of the secret bond and the plan to end the war quietly. Her breath caught. The walls of the palace suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. Kale's face flashed in her mind, his determined eyes from their meeting at the river. If he tried to stop this on his own, the enemy would surely catch him and both of them could die. But she couldn't stay hidden. She could not let fear dictate the fate of her people. Liara found him later that night, standing on the walls overlooking the battlefield. Kale's armor was scratched and dented, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes glowed with the same fierce determination she had always admired. He turned to her as she approached, sensing the urgency in her movements. "They know," she whispered. "Someone has discovered our plan. There's an assassination plot tonight." Kale's jaw tightened. Then we have no choice. We act now. They huddled together, speaking quickly, voices trembling with the weight of the risk. There was no room for mistakes. Every soldier, every general, every shadow could betray them, and yet in the midst of danger, their hands brushed, and a spark of comfort passed between them. The bond that had survived childhood separation and now war strengthened in that small touch. Liara's heart pounded as she realized the truth. To survive, to protect their people, they had to be bold. They had to confront the enemy, reveal the truth, and face whatever consequences came. And most terrifying of all, they had to trust each other completely because any hesitation could mean death. As the night deepened and the city slept uneasily, the princess and the warrior prepared themselves. They went over every detail of the plan, every escape route, every signal they would use. Fear pressed heavily on their shoulders, but courage burned brighter in their hearts. Liara looked at Kale, the man who had been her friend, her protector, and now her partner in this impossible task. "No matter what happens," she said, voice trembling but steady, "we do this together." Kyle nodded, his eyes softening. "Together," he repeated. And in that quiet moment, before the storm of confrontation, they made a silent promise. They would face the betrayal, the danger, and the impossible odds as one. For their people, for each other, and for the hope that even in war, trust and love could survive. The city held its breath, unaware that the fate of empires and of two hearts was about to be decided. The palace gates creaked open, revealing the courtyard bathed in the pale light of dawn. Princess Liara stepped forward, her posture regal despite the fear curling in her stomach. Beside her, Kale's armor was battered and scarred from weeks of fighting, yet he moved with unwavering determination. Together they faced the enemy generals, the men who had brought fire and destruction to Zathara. Their soldiers lined the courtyard, a tense sea of weapons and armor waiting for the first command. The generals laughed at the sight of the princess and her ally. "Defiant," one sneered. "Even after everything, you think you can stop us?" Liara lifted her chin, her voice steady and strong. "This war ends today, not with more blood, not with conquest, not with fear. We don't have to be enemies. Look at what we've lost. Look at what this war has done to us all." The generals exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The soldiers behind them shifted nervously, some lowering their weapons slightly. Liara took a deep breath, her heart pounding, and continued. "We can choose another path. We can save lives instead of taking them. We can be stronger together than we ever are apart." Kyle stepped forward, his voice carrying authority and sincerity. "I am with her," he said. "I fight not for conquest, not for orders, but for what is right. I fight for the people who deserve to live in peace." The generals stiffened, faces hardening, but they could not ignore the truth in his words. Kale's loyalty had always been admired, and the sight of him standing with Liara, defying their command, struck a chord in every soldier watching. Hesitation spread like wildfire. Then something remarkable happened. One by one, soldiers began lowering their weapons, the tension in the air shifting. They looked at the princess and the warrior and saw courage, honesty, and the bond between them. A bond that had survived childhood separation and war. A bond that now demanded recognition and respect. The general's laughter faltered, replaced by uncertainty and fear. Their power depended on obedience, yet their troops were no longer willing to follow blindly. In that moment, Liara and Kale's courage became more powerful than any army, more commanding than any weapon. Liara's voice rang clear, filled with conviction. "This is your choice. Follow the path of more blood, or follow the path of honor and life. History will remember what you decide here today," Kale added. "We are not your enemies, but if you continue this war, the cost will be greater than you can imagine. End it now. Stand with us and we will all survive." For a long, tense moment, the generals hesitated. Their eyes flicked to their soldiers, then back to Liara and Kale. The pressure of responsibility, the weight of the lives at stake, pressed down on them. Slowly, one general dropped his weapon, then another. And then, like a wave, the rest followed. The courtyard fell silent, broken only by the soft sigh of relief and the distant sound of fires dying down. Liara's heart swelled as she turned to Kale, seeing the same astonishment and relief mirrored in his eyes. The impossible had happened. They had stopped the war, not with violence, but with courage, trust, and the unbreakable bond of two hearts. Kyle reached for Liara's hand, holding it tightly. "We did it," he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. She squeezed his hand back, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she said softly. "We did it. Together." The battlefield, once filled with chaos and death, now felt alive with hope. Soldiers returned to their homes, enemies turned allies, and Zathara's people began to rebuild. The princess and the warrior had shown that true strength was not in weapons or armies. It was in trust, loyalty, and the courage to stand for what is right, even against impossible odds. And in that moment, beneath the light of the rising sun, Kale and Liara knew something more profound than victory. They knew that even in the darkest times, humanity, its courage, love, and resilience, could change the course of history. The war was over, not because one side had crushed the other, but because two hearts refused to let hate win. Months had passed since the battle that had changed Zathara forever. The city, once scarred by war, was slowly beginning to heal. Crumbled towers were being rebuilt, streets swept clean, and laughter, soft, cautious, but growing, returned to the people. Princess Liara walked among her citizens, her heart swelling with hope. The wounds of the past were deep, but she knew that with courage and unity they could be healed. Kyle was by her side. No longer a soldier fighting against a kingdom, he had become a partner, a friend, and something more. Together they helped coordinate rebuilding efforts, overseeing projects and ensuring that both safety and fairness guided every decision. Liara watched him interact with the citizens, the way he listened to their stories, shared their grief, and offered encouragement. It reminded her of the boy she had known long ago, kind and fearless, now grown into a man of wisdom and courage. Despite the physical rebuilding, the emotional scars of war were still present. Families mourned lost loved ones. Soldiers carried memories of battles, and distrust lingered in some hearts. Liara understood this well. She spent hours speaking with her people, listening to their fears, their anger, and their hopes. She wanted them to know that the future could be different, that it did not have to repeat the tragedies of the past. Kyle often stood quietly beside her during these moments, offering support not with words but with presence. When she met eyes with him, she felt a sense of grounding, a reminder that they had survived together, that their bond was stronger than any hardship. In the evenings, they would walk along the river, now peaceful and sparkling under the twin moons, sharing memories of the past and dreams of the future. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Liara stopped by the riverbank. Kale followed, and for a moment they simply stood there in silence, watching the water ripple gently. "You've changed so much," Liara said softly, her voice full of emotion, not just in strength but in heart. "You've given so much to our people." "To me," Kale smiled, but it was tinged with humility. "I was only able to do it because of you. You reminded me what courage really means. You reminded me who I am and who I want to be." Tears pricked her eyes. "We both changed. We survived war, betrayal, and fear. And somehow, we found each other again. That's what matters most." They sat by the river for hours, talking, laughing, and sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. The past was still there, but it no longer had power over them. Instead, it had shaped them, forged their bond into something unbreakable. The people of Zathara began to notice the partnership between the princess and the warrior. It inspired hope. Citizens who had once feared the future now found courage in their leaders. Soldiers who had fought alongside Kyle now respected the strength of loyalty, while those who had served under Liara learned that leadership could be kind, fair, and just. Slowly, the wounds of war began to mend, not just in stone and steel, but in hearts. One evening, Liara placed a hand on Kale's arm, smiling softly. "Do you remember when we used to dream by this river? We thought the world was full of adventure, not war." Kyle chuckled. "Yes, and now we've found a different kind of adventure, one worth living." Liara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe, truly hopeful. Together they had survived the impossible, and together they would guide their people into a future of peace, love, and resilience. In the quiet of the night, as the stars reflected on the river, Liara and Kale made a silent promise to protect not just their kingdom, but the bond that had brought hope to a broken world. And for the first time, they could imagine a future without war, filled with trust, courage, and a love that had endured everything. The twin moons of Zethra rose high in the sky, casting silver light over the city that had survived fire, war, and despair. Princess Liara stood atop the palace walls, her eyes scanning the streets below, now alive with the gentle hum of rebuilding. Laughter echoed faintly from the market. The soft chatter of children filled the squares, and the air no longer carried the scent of smoke and fear. For the first time in months, Liara felt a deep, settling peace in her heart. Kale stepped up beside her, his hand brushing lightly against hers. He looked out over the city, his chest swelling with quiet pride. He had fought battles with weapons and battles with his own conscience, but now he stood in a place that mattered most, beside Liara, looking at a future they had fought so hard to save. Liara turned to him, her eyes reflecting the glow of the moons. "Do you remember our promise?" she asked softly, almost as if speaking aloud would make the words real. Kale's lips curved into a small, tender smile. "To always protect each other, no matter what. And we kept it," she said, her voice trembling slightly, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and love. "We survived war, betrayal, and fear. We kept each other safe." Kyle reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "We did, and now, we protect our people together. We fight for life, not for war." They stood together in silence, listening to the city around them. Every sound, the hammering of tools, the cheerful cries of children, the soft laughter of families reunited, felt like a victory more profound than any battle. The war was over, but what mattered most was not the end of fighting. It was the chance to rebuild, to heal, and to live. Liara's gaze softened. "Kyle, I never thought we'd get here. I never thought the boy I played with in the palace gardens would grow into the man who would save my people and stand with me in the darkest hours." Kyle laughed quietly, a warm, gentle sound that carried the weight of relief. "And I never imagined that the girl I promised to protect would grow into the princess who taught me what courage really means." They leaned into each other, heads touching lightly, feeling the strength and comfort of the bond that had endured so much. The years of separation, the battles, the fear, they had only made their connection stronger, deeper, and more unshakable. As the moons climbed higher, Liara whispered, "No matter what comes next, we face it together." Kale's eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "Together," he repeated, his voice full of promise and certainty. The city below shimmered in the moonlight, a testament to their survival, their courage, and the love that had guided them through impossible odds. They knew there would be challenges ahead. Rebuilding a kingdom, mending hearts, and protecting peace would take time, effort, and patience. But for now, they could simply stand together, knowing that the bond they shared was unbreakable. Liara took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, carrying with it a sense of hope she had not known in years. "Kale, thank you for remembering me, for remembering us." Kale pressed his forehead gently against hers. "I could never forget. You've always been a part of me, and now we make the future together, for ourselves and for everyone who believes in hope." For a long moment they stood there, letting the quiet of the night wrap around them, stars reflected in their eyes, mingling with tears of relief, joy, and gratitude. They had survived the war, saved their people, and rediscovered the bond that had carried them through childhood and now into a new era of peace. Liara lifted her head, looking out over the city she loved. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "We will rebuild, we will heal, and we will protect each other always." Kyle smiled, his hand holding hers firmly. "Always," he agreed. And as the twin moons of Zethra shone down, two hearts beat as one above a world that had known darkness but now embraced light. In that moment, hope was no longer fragile, it was alive, radiant, and unshakable. The princess and the warrior had survived the impossible, and in doing so they had shown that courage, love, and loyalty could overcome even the greatest of wars. Together they faced the future, their hearts united, their promise eternal, and their story a beacon for all who would hear it.